So, hello everyone. Thank you so much for being with us this morning as we delve further into the diversity engagement survey results, specifically looking at how we can develop community-based solutions. For those of you who might not know me, my name is Sharina Person. I'm a professor and vice chair of the Department of Population and Quantitative Health Sciences. I'm also one of the original developers of the DES, and I'm currently responsible for its administration nationally and internationally. So today, if I can get my slide to go forward, there we go. All right, so today, our goal is to talk a little bit more about the DES, to give you a little bit more background in how we use the DES as a foundation for helping you to be able to really fully capitalize on your results and to be able to brainstorm about how we can use those results to really impact our culture in a positive way. We're going to discuss potential meanings of the scores, so what higher and lower scores on our different engagement clusters mean. Give some examples of interventions to improve scores. Again, all of this is for the purpose of giving you the tools so that when you are looking directly at results specific to your units or your department, you can build on this foundation to kind of customize solutions that will be appropriate for your individual situations. And then we're going to take a case study from actual data from this last administration of the DES. And we're going to go through an exercise of really trying to come up with some solutions for some problems that we are going to encounter with the data. And finally, I want to give us time for question and answer so that not just about what I'm going to talk about today, but if you have any questions about the DES in general, what the results mean, how we can use that, anything that you want to ask about the DES, we're going to try to make sure we have enough time to give you that opportunity to ask those questions. All right, so the DES, the Diversity Engagement Survey, really was designed to capture information about member engagement, and particularly about the inclusive characteristics of the organization, as well as the degree to which diverse groups experience inclusion. So we all know that we view through whatever lens that we personally have. And so you can have two people in the same situation, but they view the situation differently depending on the lens that they view the world through. So we found that the DES is best used for a number of possible uses, such as building inclusive culture, whether that be for the purposes of recruitment, retention, or promotion of diverse individuals. If you're trying to understand the level of engagement of the total workforce in relationship to specific diverse groups, like I mentioned, depending on whatever lens you see the world through, you're going to experience a similar environment differently. If you're trying to assess baseline strengths and areas for improvement related to inclusion and diversity efforts, and that's one of the ways the UMass Chan has been using the DES. You know, we have a rich longitudinal history of taking the DES, and as a result, we can compare how we are improving over time. If you're trying to determine progress towards your inclusion goals, or you're trying to have a response to regulatory agencies, as well as trying to really get deep into concerns that your respondents may have that may originate from a number of different situations like historical baggage, etc. So there are three main functions of the DES. It's descriptive, it's diagnostic, and it's prescriptive. Descriptive in that it describes the inclusiveness of the environment by determining level of engagement by demographic categories. It's diagnostic in that it defines areas of strength and areas of improvement for your diversity and inclusion efforts through benchmark comparative data. And as we've seen in previous presentations, that we have done exceedingly well during this last administration of the DES compared to the benchmark data set. We're doing a lot of things that we should be proud of that are really moving the needle forward and UMass Chan being the place that we envision it to be, where everyone feels included and engaged and important. And it's prescriptive in that it points to a strategic direction for change by identifying which are engagement domains and which inclusion factors to target for improvement. So that's one of the benefits we feel of the DES, in that you don't just get a general score, that now you're trying to figure out how do I move this total score up, but instead we have strategic inclusion factors and engagement clusters that we can see where one we might be doing really well on, and so we want to maintain what we're doing, while others there might be more opportunities for improvement, and so we can focus our energy and resources to those specific things. So just to remind you how we're calculating scores, if you remember from taking the DES, that things were scored on a 5-point Likert scale, going from strongly agree to strongly disagree. And for ease of presentation, we combine the strongly agree and agree categories and call that favorable. So everything is going to be in terms of favorable rather than mean scores, etc., that we also use in other arenas. All right, so I want to reorient you to the engagement domains or clusters, I'm going to refer to them as, and inclusion factors that are being measured by the DES, because we're going to be talking about those in more detail a little bit later in the presentation. So we have the 22 items of the DES. Each of those questions map onto one of these inclusion factors. So appreciation of individual attributes, respect, common purpose, access to opportunity, equitable reward and recognition, cultural competence, trust, and sense of belonging are the inclusion factors that those 22 items map onto. All right. Furthermore, the factors cluster into these engagement clusters or domains. So we have, for example, this appreciation cluster that includes the inclusion factors of respect and appreciation of individual attributes. We have the vision purpose cluster that includes common purpose, access to opportunity, equitable reward and recognition, and cultural competence. And we have a camaraderie cluster that includes the factors of sense of belonging and trust. So just so you'll know, we didn't just a priori decide that these factors are going to go into these clusters. That was not just kind of a decision made on willy-nilly. This was a decision that was based on the psychometric properties and some fancy voodoo statistics that we did in the background. Okay, so nothing to see here, nothing behind the curtain, as in the Wizard of Oz. Okay, so but anyway, there was intense statistics that actually confirmed that this is how these factors actually grouped. Okay, so I wanted to make that known, as well as how the questions mapped onto these inclusion factors. That was also based on kind of the psychometric properties. All right, so I just wanted to clarify that up front, because in some instances you might read a question and say, well, that seems like that would be better over here. It wasn't just kind of a group us playing dice in the room and deciding what goes where. Okay, so I just wanted to say that. All right. So having said that about the inclusion factors and engagement clusters, we're going to talk about what do scores mean. And I understand this is a lot to kind of wrap your brain around it because I really have not ever gone into this kind of detail before. But I think it makes the foundation, as we'll see a little bit later, of helping you to kind of think about how you would formulate a plan specific to your departments or your groups that you're looking at DES data for. All right. So we're going to start off with the vision purpose cluster. All right. So what do your scores for vision purpose mean? So these are some suggested things of what higher scores or lower scores mean. So if you have higher scores in your vision purpose cluster, that may mean that your institution has real clarity on what constitutes diversity and inclusion. It's not this kind of amorphous thought of what diversity and inclusion mean. Your institution or your group is clear on what that is and clearly communicates what that is. It may mean that your diversity programming is aligned with the mission, vision, and values of the institution. All right. It may mean that your evaluation methods exist for improvement. All right. So there's always room for improvement. I've heard it said the biggest room in the house is the room for improvement. All right. So there are evaluation methods in place for you to really assess where you are. Your organization is continually in a learning mode. You don't feel like you've arrived, but you're in a learning mode that's characterized by cultural humility. You understand that you don't know everything there is to know. And I've always found that the more I know, the more I realize I don't know. All right. So if you are in that place, then you might have higher scores. That might be reflected in higher scores for your respondents in the vision purpose cluster. And it may also mean that your organization is innovative in experimenting with new diversity initiatives and evaluates results in a positive manner. So we're not just doing the same things or just focusing on the traditional big ticket items, if you will, in diversity, but we recognize that there are other things that constitute diversity that we need to be paying attention to as well. Now, what lower scores for vision purpose might mean is that you really have a broad or loosely defined definition of diversity. The institution's goals for diversity are not understood or communicated. So are you doing it because it's important, it's foundational, it's crucial to your mission, or you're doing it because it's the end thing and that's what everybody expects you to be doing right now? And if that's the case, it's going to come through. It's going to manifest in lower scores that your respondents are giving. It may reflect that your institution lacks strategy or clear direction about where it wants to go in this diversity space. As well, it may indicate that your institution lacks diversity metrics. So you're kind of throwing a whole bunch of things up at the wall and hoping something sticks. All right. It may also mean that the analysis and implementation of diversity is superficial. Again, there is no deep meaning, no foundational structure of why diversity is important, because that has to be communicated. One other thing that I think is very important is for people to realize that we all are diverse. Regardless of what groups we come from, there are multiple dimensions of diversity that we view the world through. And it doesn't matter if you're not in one of the traditional big ticket diverse categories, you still have there are dimensions of diversity that you possess. So I think that's important. If that doesn't come across, that may reflect in a lower vision purpose score. As well, it may be reflective of there being unwritten rules or practices that go unquestioned. Now, one of the worst things that you want to do is to give the impression that there is a secret society who makes these decisions, and there are these unwritten rules that nobody knows how to play the game because nobody else but the select group of people have the rules to the game. So you don't want that to come across. And if that is coming across, that if that perception is coming across, then it may reflect in there being lower scores in the vision purpose cluster. So let's look specifically at our scores now in the vision purpose cluster, and then look at some suggested interventions. Now, these are not the end all be all. There are numerous things that are not here. Some of these things may or may not work for you because we understand that every group is different and unique, but this is just to get your creative juices to start flowing. All right. So one of the first factors in the vision purpose cluster was common purpose. And by common purpose, again, just to remind you, we mean that the individual experiences a connection to the mission, vision, and values of the institution. Now, this is one where we score really high on. All right. So in fact, we're above the benchmark for this. So by and large, most people seem to have a favorable view about being connected to the mission, vision, and values of the institution. If that weren't the case, though, some of the suggested interventions for increasing scores would be to make sure that people realize the organization or whatever your department, etc., is branded as being as diversity affirming. That's an inclusive organization. You want to make sure your diversity program has a defined purpose, a targeted diversity competency, and a business tie-in. So again, it's not just diversity for diversity's sake, but we value this as a foundational principle of our business. And as a result, it is extremely important to us. So that is a potential intervention for helping to increase scores in this area. Another suggested intervention might be to develop diversity best practices or current struggles profile. So specifically what we mean is doing the hard look at what's working currently and what's not working currently. As much as we would love for everything that we do to work, everything just does not work. And so sometimes you have to take a hard look at what's working and what's not working. And then the key part of that is sharing that among your stakeholders for buy-in. So there are a number of things. I can just attest personally because I wear multiple hats. And we'll talk about this when we get to equitable reward and recognition. But as wearing multiple hats, as part of the executive leadership of my department, there are things for a fact that I know that we do regarding making sure people are compensated equally, making sure that we are going through, and whenever we need to make salary adjustments, doing that. Whenever we see people faculty in rank for a period of time and we want them to go up for promotion, or staff in position for a period of time and we want them to go for a promotion, I know for a fact, because I sit in those meetings and we do it, that we're constantly doing that. But yet people don't realize it because we're not saying it. We're not sharing it. We're not completely transparent. Yes, I mean, obviously there's certain things we can't say. We can't share everything. But if people know that this is one of your practices, this is one of the things that you're doing on a regular basis, because there's transparency, then you can get the buy-in from your respondents. As well, you might want to develop some type of internal benchmarking standards of your own and create a dashboard so that you can monitor where you are and where you're going. All right. So those are just some suggested interventions for increasing scores. And Candace has this presentation, and so she's going to share it with everyone to make sure that you have this really kind of as just a guide so that you'll have something to use. All right, so access to opportunity is another one of our inclusion factors in the vision purpose cluster. Again, this is one where access to opportunity, again, just as a reminder, means the individual is able to find and use support for their own professional development and advancement. So they see that there is a path for them and they're able to access any supports to help them along that path. So again, we are above the benchmark for that. And we have increased by 6 points since the last administration, which is great. We're not, over 80% yet. And 80 is just kind of a natural cut point in my head. There's not any statistical threshold or anything like that. Okay, I don't want you to think that there's some magic number, but just it sounds pretty, okay, for me. So so that's why I said 80. But here are some suggested interventions for increasing scores in the access to opportunity realm. Consider some kind of mentoring circles. And I know we do a lot of that here at UMass, and probably part of the reason why we have gone up 6 points since the last time. You might want to facilitate no agenda dialogue sessions with leadership and underrepresented groups. Again, people want to feel like they're being heard. They want to feel like you're listening to them. If you communicate clear, defined career paths for advancement for everyone, so that they understand that there is a path here at UMass, rather than having to jump ship to go somewhere else just to be to receive advancement. And again, here's this whole idea about transparency. So promote open, transparent, and consistently applied recruitment and hiring practices aligned with employment opportunity programs and plans. So I know there DIO has done quite a bit in really kind of help us, particularly in the vein of diversity, but just to make sure that we are using a common, transparent approach to our hiring practices. So again, people don't want to feel like, can you imagine you're in a position, say you're a staff member, you're in a position, you've been here, you're a known element for multiple years, and someone can come out from the outside, an unknown element, to come in, get a advanced position, kind of in the same vein that you're in, but no one has ever communicated to you, a path that you could have taken to also be eligible for that position. So that can be demoralizing. That can be, you're not going to feel included or engaged. And I would be looking for another job, me personally, okay? And so this is one of the things that we can do. We have control over this to do. My personal goal, and I don't hit it 100%, but my personal goal is I want to make it downright difficult for you to leave me if you work for me. Okay, I want you up at night sweating, having nightmares about leaving me. And then if you still decide to leave me, then that's fine. But I don't want this to be an easy decision for you. And so I want to make sure that's one of the things that we should ascribe to and one of the ways we can do that is making sure people realize that there is a path and working on what that path might look like if they so choose to go down that road. Okay, equitable reward and recognition again is one of the still part of the vision purpose cluster. This is one I mentioned it. I mention this every time I talk about the DES. This is historically a hard one to move, a hard nut to crack. All right. Um, and like I said, I think I'm coming to the epiphany now that some of the problem is that people don't realize that we're doing these things in the background, if we are, okay? So you might want to conduct gender, race, compensation, equity reviews on a regular basis. I know for a fact, at least in the faculty realm, because again, I see that quite often, but I believe it happens as well from the HR point of view, that they look very closely at salaries in an agnostic way based on your experience. And so if there is a discrepancy between um, faculty in the same rank or a staff in the same kind of position, they'll bring it to our attention and say, hey, what are you going to do about this? We need to do something about it. But I don't think the end users or the respondents to the survey actually know that happens. So we need to do a better job. Again, not going into gory details, we don't have to do that. But for people to know this is part of our policy, this is what we do, is I think the only way that we're going to ever overcome this. Some other options are to develop spot awards or other incentive programs that are tied to over and beyond performance. You want to reward your stars, who are doing, really great things. Incorporating diversity goals in performance management system and tie compensation to diversity achievement. So it's great that there are more teeth now being put into kind of diversity efforts in our performance appraisal. And so, that's one way to possibly help increase scores, as well as establishing some kind of monetary award for advancing institutional excellence in diversity. Again, things don't have to be prohibitively expensive, just something that makes people feel valued. One of the things that my department does, usually around the fall of the year, the executive faculty, not even all the faculty, the executive leadership team, we put money together out of our own pockets, and we buy gift cards for all the staff, and we send them Visa gift cards. I think these faculty are all very happy to do it. I think the last time we might have given them $50 or $60 gift cards to all of our staff in the department. It's not the amount of money, it's the fact that you thought about them to do something, to acknowledge how much they mean to us and how vitally important they are to the work that we all do. So little things like that people just want to feel appreciated. And then the final inclusion factor in our vision purpose cluster is cultural competence. And by cultural competence, we mean that the individual believes the institution has the capacity to make creative use of its members in a way that's going to meet the business goals, enhance the performance, and achieve the mission. And so, again, this is another one where we're not above 80, but we are above the benchmark, and we made a significant stride over the last 3 years, going up 7 points. And some suggested interventions. for increasing scores might be to institute campus workplace read of a diversity book, and we do that religiously here at the institution, so that's great. Integrating cultural competence educational information into staff meetings. I will tell you, my department has a diversity action committee, and so we view the diversity action committee as ambassadors for DEI in the department. And so one of the things that we do on a regular basis is we have trainings within our diversity action committee that in diversity. So we might have we had trainings about the dimensions of diversity, high and low context, so that you can understand where how an individual communicates. You know, for example, I'm very low context, which means that I'm one of those type of people. If you encounter me in the wild, you know, I try to pretty up and recognize this area of me. So how you encounter me now is different than how you would if you just encountered me out in the wild. But I'm very low context, which means I want you to get to the point. I don't want all the flowery language. Just get to the point, get to the point, get to the point, get to the point. That's how I normally am, all right, in the wild. But recognizing that there are others that are high context. So, you know, they want to talk about, you know, other things. They want to start a conversation. They want to make a connection with you, and then they tell you what they need. And so recognizing that I'm different than others, you know, I have to meet people halfway. And so that's one of the trainings that we have done. And I can tell you numerous members of our DAC have said it really impacted how they interacted with others. Informational, educational information regarding diversity in staff meetings. Also, providing leadership briefings on diversity work trends might be another way that you can have to increase your scores in cultural competence. All right, so we have 2 more clusters, and then we get to time where you all can think, and it's not just me talking at you, but we can talk with each other. All right, appreciation. What this cluster means, okay? What do higher scores and lower scores for the appreciation cluster factors mean? Well, higher scores might mean that job roles and responsibilities are clearly defined, so as to avoid role confusion and role ambiguity. It may mean that there are programs that exist that recognize contributions individuals bring to the organization. We don't ever want people to feel like they're a cog, that they're easily replaceable. We want to make sure people feel that we recognize them as a person. And so higher scores may indicate that people are feeling that you're valuing them as a person. Efforts to achieve your institutional goals for diversity are recognized and rewarded. So that might be another meaning of what a higher score means here. Individual identity is appreciated as an organizational strength. So we don't all have to be the same, but it's all of these unique characteristics about us that pull together really strengthens our organization. There's a diversity of thoughts, all right? And diversity-related conflict is viewed as an opportunity to enhance appreciation, support empowerment, and develop creative outcomes. So we don't want to come across as if there's never going to be conflict, but we can view a conflict that happens to occur as an opportunity for us to work through and further develop and support our diversity. Lower scores might mean that there is token representation of underrepresented groups for image or political reasons. That's a big one. We don't want people to feel like they're being tokenized in any way. It may mean that underrepresented groups are hired but relegated to lower positions or culturally specific positions. We always hear about the minority tax. So we don't want, so lower scores may mean that people are really feeling like I'm here for a specific reason that deals with my dimensions of diversity and not because you value what I bring to the table. It also may mean demographic diversity is represented, but not diversity of thought and expression. So we were just talking about the idea that we don't all have to think the same. And in fact, it's better if we don't all think the same. We want to have the same values, but we don't have to think the same. All right. All right. So in the appreciation cluster, you can see how creative we were in calling it the appreciation cluster, and one of the factors is appreciation of individual attributes. So anyway, this is one of those that, again, we haven't quite reached the 80%, but we did make a modest bump up from the last time we did the survey. And appreciation of individual attributes means the individual feels like they're valued and can successfully navigate the institutional structure in their express group identities. So whatever lenses I look through, I am able to express all of me in this organization. So some suggested intervention for increasing scores might be a Make a Difference campaign of inclusion. It's where people can really express the three things that they're doing to contribute to the mission of the organization and celebrating what that is that they bring to the mission. You know, one of the things that we try to do, at least in my department, is we try to make sure everybody, all the way down to, you know, a research assistant, celebrates in any new grant that we get, because they are a vital part of that grant. It's not just the people who are writing all the things that go in, but if our budget people didn't do what they do, grant couldn't go in. If our research assistants weren't doing the literature reviews, we couldn't put the science down. If our admins weren't putting the references in the application, we couldn't do what we're doing. So that everyone feels like they are a part of any success that we have, and it's not just the faculty, or that everybody is involved. And so that may be a way to foster feelings of appreciation for people. All right. So what about the next factor in the appreciation cluster? That's respect. Respect means that individual experiences a culture of civility and positive regard for diverse perspective, ways of knowing, and expression. And so we did really well on respect. So what other ways, suggested interventions for increasing scores might be that you're making sure that your underrepresented people from your underrepresented groups have an opportunity to present research findings or provide educational sessions in their respective communities, ensuring that all media communications representing the institution are branded for diversity. Again, we want to ensure that people understand that this matters. All right, camaraderie. I'm speeding up just a little bit because I really want to get to the point where you all can think and it's not just me talking. All right, I know what my voice sounds like, and so I don't need to hear it just for the sake of hearing it. All right, so camaraderie. That's our last cluster. And so higher scores in camaraderie might mean that there are There are programming that exists for networking among diverse groups and across institutional levels. There might be cross-cultural mentoring programs that are in existence. There's collaboration and dialogue used for decision making. And another example is that people of color, women, LGBTQA individuals are included outside of race, gender, sexual orientation specific roles. Okay, so I can be included in a group that doesn't just have that only is Black females. Okay, I can be included in larger groups, and that there's the opportunity for us to collaborate and have friendships and that sort of thing. Lower scores might mean that contacts are limited to a few diverse individuals made for convenience and expediency, or that mentoring practices are limited to dominant groups. So that is some examples of what lower scores and camaraderie might mean. All right, so if we look at our camaraderie scores, trust, which is in the camaraderie cluster. Trust means an individual has confidence that the policies, practices, and procedures of the institution will allow them to bring their best and full self. We'll get back to trust in a minute in our example. We are above the benchmark, but we are still below that 80% mark, although we did make all 3-point improvement since the last time. Some suggested interventions for increasing scores might be establishing communication regarding diversity and inclusion to enhance transparency, consistent messaging through an annual diversity report via website. So hopefully everybody took the diversity annual report that the DIO office had yesterday. I found it to be very informational and something that I haven't seen done before. So I hope everybody appreciates that. I am not in DIO, so this is not a paid plug, but but the fact that they went through the process of really trying to show that, again, I believe fosters trust. Establishing and implementing a policy evaluation procedure for equity and inclusion, and incorporating diversity goals into leadership succession planning might be ways to improve our trust scores. And finally, a sense of belonging. Again, didn't quite make that 80% cut point, if you will. Down a little bit from 2020. And what sense of belonging means is that individuals experiences their social group identities being connected and accepted in the institution. All right, not tolerated, accepted, and really we should say valued. All right. Some suggested interventions for increasing scores might be to establish employee resource groups or affinity groups, and we do that really well. And also maybe hosting no agenda dialogue sessions with employee resource groups or affinity networks in leadership. All right. So case study. This is what I wanted to really get to. All right. So if you remember from, I'm not sure if Marlena showed this slide during the town hall, but I showed it yesterday during the diversity summit. And there are numerous things we could look at. I just decided to look at this. All right. And this is overall favorable rating for diversity and inclusion by position at the institution. And what I circled here is students. Students had the lowest score, or we should say learners, had the lowest score along with postdocs, all right? It was an increase from 2020, but it's still the lowest score. And so I want us to move from a unidimensional focus to a multidimensional focus. All right. And I bring up the concept of intersectionality that you all probably know about, probably know it far better than I do. But the idea behind intersectionality is that we recognize that there are multiple dimensions of diversity a person self-identifies as possessing, and that those multiple dimensions simultaneously work in that in either disadvantage or privilege that we might have. So, for example, if I have an affront to me that's non-specific, it's hard for me to distinguish whether it is a affront to me because of my race, ethnicity, of my gender. When I first moved here, it might have been because of my accent, um, because I had a little bit of a Southern twang to my accent. So those are multiple dimensions of me, but I cannot distinguish that this is because of this. So recognizing that I have multi dimensions, instead of just looking at you being a student or learner, I just took an example of, let's look at if you're a learner and female or a learner and male. All right. So these are each of the questions, but for sake of time, I want to get to the questions. So the blue bar is overall, the green bar is female, the yellow bar is male, and by female and male, we're talking about gender identity. All right. So I think it's so I wanted to focus on, look at question 11. I believe my institution manages diversity effectively. Overall, the score is 50, which is not good. But if you look at the difference between how people are self-identify as being female and those who self-identify as being male, it's almost a 10-point difference in the favorable rating. Okay. We look at question 13. If I raise a concern about discrimination, I am confident my institution will do what is right. Again, only a 56% favorable rating for that. And a 16-point difference between those who self-identify as being female and those who self-identify as being male. And the other one, while there's not as big a difference between the two, it's still not a great overall favorable rating. I feel that I am an integral part of my department or school. So I wanted us to spend just a few minutes thinking about these three. And again, the question 11 comes from the cultural competence factor. Question 13 loads on the trust factor. Question 21 loads on the sense of belonging factor. And for your convenience, I put what those factors are trying to measure. And I wanted us to, as a group, to spend some time thinking and brainstorming about how we might address any one of these issues. There are no right or wrong answers. I don't have a preconceived notion of what we should be doing. I want us to start thinking about this collectively, and so that you go through this process when you are, looking at results specific to your departments or groups. So does anyone have any okay, Mary Ellen.
Yeah, Sharita, this is amazing. Thank you. And I put a comment in the chat. I do know that female identity is a majority in the student population. Do you have at the top of your head those numbers, just so we can all get a sense of what that differential really is? And I guess my question to you or anybody would be, what is so does having that context enlighten or inform this discussion at all? I'm intrigued by this, actually.
Do I know what the number is overall? I want to say, and I apologize for not having that at the top of my head. I want to say it might be somewhere in the order of magnitude of about 60%.
That's my sort of feeling, I guess. And I think that, you know, it's back of the envelope calculations, but that's my sense as well.
Yeah, and it does factor um, into this. If a large percentage of your population is not feeling that diversity is handled well, or they're not feeling that um, they're confident in what happens if there's discrimination. I mean, just from a pure nerd point of view, analytically, you can see that because of the overabundance of people who self-identify as being female, the average has been pulled down. 10-point difference basically has been erased or obscured for question 11. A 16-point difference has been obscured um, for question 13. And by obscured, I'm talking about look at what the overall score says. Okay, and um, so absolutely, it matters. I can tell you another institution that we worked with for the DES. They found similar numbers like this in faculty, and so they made um, um, targeted approaches toward their female faculty. So I think they might have scored really low and are feeling appreciated. Um, uh, and so they did things specific to female faculty to demonstrate their appreciation. And the next time they took the survey, those numbers skyrocketed. So that was a long answer to your question, but yes, yes. So Candace, help me with the chat because I
Yes.
haven't looked in the
Uh,
chat, but maybe
Mary,
people say something.
Mary Ellen put a comment earlier when you were mentioning tokenism.
Hmm.
Um, and she said that we often hear from our underrepresented students that feel that their pictures are used for advertising of diversity in a dishonest manner. And this is deeply troubling and goes a long way to explain the lower scores.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
And
absolutely.
and Dr. Duncan just put in the link to the diversity dashboards.
Wonderful, wonderful. So how might we address some of these issues? Yes, Mary Ellen.
Yeah, I'm sorry I talk so much, but you know, I'm thinking about this a lot, especially as the trust issue is something that I've been following over the years in the diversity engagement survey. And while, it's heartening that it's up, it's up from a low place and hasn't gone to a high place yet. Right.
Mhm.
But I mean, one of the things that I think about with trusting the institution to handle complaints, issues, grievances, discrimination is from the learner perspective. Okay. And I know this from conversations with learners. From the learner perspective, there's not a lot of transparency around how faculty misconduct is dealt with, things that impact the learning environment. Learners are very confused about what happens here, and for that reason, very mistrustful of engaging with the formal processes that are established. And I think another contributing factor might be that there are tools for kind of anonymous reporting, and the anonymous reports are not actionable. And so there's a sense that complaints are not heard and not dealt with. And so there's a real, yeah, so that goes into a box somewhere and something happens, but nobody knows. And that's, that is a common perception among students that I'm aware of.
And as you just pointed out, it's reflected in the trust score. You know, I think that sounds like it's a paradigm shift in how we implement a policy. You know, and I can imagine, just at least anecdotally, if I had a problem with an instructor, a very serious problem, and while I understand as well that there are certain things that can be said and things that can't be said, but there has to be something tangible that is observed so that people recognize that, you know, the situation is being investigated and properly handled. Otherwise, like you said, people are not going to want to come forward. And it reflects in our ability to recruit, it affects in our ability to retain, because, you know, who better to learn about the environment of an institution that they have no experience with, except from another learner. And learner and people talk. It's like, well, if I were you, I wouldn't come here, because they don't, you know. So anyway, not to get sidetracked, but so we only have 2 minutes left, and so I apologize for talking a long time. But are there any questions? Any questions that anyone has about the DES right now? And I want to volunteer and say, if there are questions that you have, burning questions that we can't answer in the 2 minutes, please don't hesitate to contact me. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you might have that we can't get to here. Okay, I guess there aren't any questions.
You know, I do have a question. This is Josh Singer, and there are two pictures of me because I can't get my camera to work on my PC. But the question I have is, every time and this goes right to one of your beginning slides, every time I ask, what would diversity look like if we have achieved success? The question is either deflected or not answered. And I think, to me, that's a very important thing. If you're going to be benchmarking anything, you have to benchmark it to what we think we should be like. And again, you may not have time to answer this question, but somewhere I'd like to see a definition of success.
No, I think that's a good point. That's outside of my pay grade in the sense that I am in this capacity, I'm more of a vendor, if you will, of the DES. I provide a tool to UMass as well as to other institutions that do the DES. Just from one person's opinion, though, I think success in diversity depends on what metric we're trying to deal with. If we're talking about representation, we should look like the community as a whole, not necessarily oversampled in any one capacity, but we should reflect, you know, our community. Success in diversity to me, not just from a demographic point of view, but from diversity in opinion, diversity in thought, and primarily we have created an environment where people feel respected, where they feel like their opinions matter, where they feel like they are a vital part to the community, where they feel like they're more than just a cog in a wheel, but they are important to the mission, vision, and values. I know that's a very esoteric and amorphous definition of success, but that's my those are my thoughts. Again, I'm not the diversity experts here per se. We have a wonderful office of the DI office that are expressly trained in these capacities. That again, not a paid volunteer, not a paid promotion, but I think they're doing a tremendous job in helping to move the culture of the institution.
Something you said in the beginning about the reflecting the community, and I agree with that. But which community do we reflect? Worcester, Massachusetts, the whole United States? That has never been defined. And I agree with all the things you also said about diversity, respecting diversity of opinion. I really do. But I still think in the end, you have to have some kind of numbers of what constitutes a community and how we're matching up. As I said, maybe Lynn has an answer for that, but that's my concern.
So I won't speak for Lynn, because again, and again, this is my own opinion. This does not reflect the opinions of the DI office, but I will say that especially given the landscape that we're in right now, we have to be very careful about our definitions. I'm even being very careful about the word choices that I'm using right now, but I think that's a harder question to answer than it may appear on the outside. Hopefully I have not said anything that violates anything, and when I log back into my computer, I'm not able to log back in anymore. So all right, thank you everyone for your attention, and I really appreciate you listening to me drone on for all this time. So
thank you, everyone. I will send
you.
the slide deck out to all that register. Thank you again. Thank you, Sharina. Great session.